Hey, Greg, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Thanks for having me on, Brian. I'm really happy to be here. I actually have had a very circuitous career. I actually started working as a professional in theater, film, and television in New York and also in London. And then I fell into a job delivering training for the New York City Police Department using my skills in improvisation and theater. And it was back then when I was a very young man working for the police that I realized that my attitude towards police officers was a little disrespectful, to say the least. And I learned that respect is a two-way street, and that when police are disrespected, they don't necessarily treat the people they're supposed to serve with respect. So I think as we look what's happening in our society now, this was a lesson that I learned when I was very young. The next thing that happened to me is I moved to Europe and I worked as a freelance journalist on assignment for BBC Radio and many other UK media, such as the Times of London. And I got the opportunity to cover the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. And again, when I was there interviewing people from East Berlin and West Berlin, I noticed again how respect, or the lack of it, played such an important role in how people got along and how societies function. Eventually, I returned to the United States and began using my skills and tools in delivering corporate training on diversity and inclusion and respect. And that is to much of a degree what I do now. I serve as an executive coach, a leadership development trainer and facilitator on respect and what I call respectful leadership for major corporations, and as well as federal, city, and state government.
Cool. Now, how do you define respect?
Well, it's an interesting question because a lot of people don't think about respect very much.
No, they don't.
And there's a lot of mythology around respect. The way I define it is treating people the way you want to be treated, the so-called golden rule, but also adding in what's called the platinum rule,
Yeah.
treating people the way they want to be treated.
Yeah.
So respect and what I call respectful leadership are simply the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and the platinum rule: do unto others as they would have you do unto them, working in concert together. That's what I consider to be respect.
Now, how do you go about getting clients? Because I think everyone thinks they respect other people. I don't think anyone, I'm really disrespectful. Just anyone sitting
Uh,
around doing that.
yeah. Well, it's more a result of what happens down the line. Very
Yeah.
often I'll get a call from somebody in senior leadership in the C-suite, or maybe HR, or even the legal department, and they'll say, hey, we've got a senior leader here who a lot of people feel is very disrespectful. We love them. They're a real rainmaker here. We want to keep them. Can you fix them? And that's very often the call I get. Or I get a call, people say, hey, we've got a culture here where disrespect seems to be the norm, and we're getting a lot of negative fallout and impact from that. Can you help us with that? So those are the ways I get clients and people that need help. I would say that the big challenge for me is very often the call comes in almost too late.
Right.
Too often in a busy environment where the bottom line is the most important thing, profitability, making your numbers, respect is kind of considered to be a nice to have.
Yeah.
And all of our research, all the work we've done over many, many years has proven to us that actually respect is a key driver of productivity, performance, and partnership. And if you fail to value and practice respect, it will cost you big time. And I've got a laundry list of data that demonstrates that very clearly.
And have you done any research into the why, the neuroscience of it?
Yes. Thank you for asking. There's a very interesting research that came out in the past 10 to 15 years that has identified respect not so much as a logical, thoughtful, cognitive kind of thing, but it's a much more of a gut that comes from our reptilian brain, where if for example, Brian, if I treat you with respect in a way that you consider respectful, it's very likely that your brain will release one of a number of hormones called oxytocin. It's also known as the bonding hormone or the love hormone. You see newborn children and their mothers have tons of oxytocin in their bloodstream.
Yep.
So if I treat you with respect, you get a little hit of oxytocin and you actually feel good. You feel upbeat, you're energized by that. And if I continue to behave that way toward you, eventually you will start thinking cognitively in your neocortex, the newer part of your brain where all the higher level thinking occurs. You'll actually start seeing and perceiving and thinking of me as a respectful person, but you won't be doing it consciously. You won't necessarily put that word out there, but you will feel that way.
Yeah.
Now, the reverse is also true. If I were to treat you in a way that you consider to be disrespectful, well, your brain releases a number of very powerful number of hormones, including adrenaline, which we all know of, cortisol, the stress hormone, and there's a third called norepinephrine, which is really hard to pronounce, and I'm not quite sure what it does. But at the end of the day, when you're feeling disrespected, Brian, and it could be something as simple as me interrupting you in a meeting in front of other people, consistently challenging you and interrupting you. You're never going to be able to finish your sentence. That will piss you off, and you'll feel disrespected, and you literally will feel it in your gut. Your throat will tighten. You'll have this reaction due to the hormone release because you're feeling under threat. And if I continue to do that to you, not only will you label me with a word we probably shouldn't say on air, but you will continue to interact with me in a way that others will see, hey, Brian doesn't have much respect for Greg, and it doesn't seem to be vice versa. And this is where we get into problems because a lot of leaders say, oh, this is no big deal. This is people being too sensitive. They're being snowflakes. Well, I am telling you, do not ignore the snowflakes because we're all snowflakes. Every one of us, including you, Brian, and you're a tough guy. Every one of us has a part of us that if I push that little button, you will explode. You will lose it. And your ability to be a calm, cool, professional, respectful adult goes right out the window. So we need to be aware that respect is a very powerful gut level feeling. And if we don't pay attention to that, we do so at our peril.
And I think that's the neuroscience is so critical because what it's really comes from is we're pushing you down on the social status.
Yes. Yes, especially if you're a leader. And you don't understand the power differential between you as a boss and your subordinates, and then you treat them with disrespect. Well, they might comply, especially if you're a command and control kind of boss. They might comply for a while, but they're going to resent it. And pretty soon there's a whole bunch of things that are going to start happening. They're going to be more disengaged. They're going to be more disloyal. They might engage in disrespectful behavior themselves towards other people and your customers. And suddenly you've got this cascading kind of infection of disrespect throughout your organization. And that can cost you in good people leaving, all sorts of problems, disincentives, people being disengaged, you name it. Disrespect is incredibly expensive.
Yeah. Because even if you think of like, the typical things that happen out in society, somebody cuts you off in traffic. Now,
Absolutely.
Did they mean to do that? Probably not. They're not like maliciously. They didn't look, or they didn't allow enough time, or it's easier to cut you off than get behind you.
That's a really good point. I used to engage in a little bit of personal road rage when people would cut me off.
It doesn't feel good, does it?
I would sometimes present the bird. And then, I don't know how I came to this, but one day I said to myself, who am I hurting here? Who am I really impacting? And I realized it was me. My blood pressure would go up. I get angry. I get all upset. So I replaced that. I give people the benefit of the doubt when they are speeding past me nowadays. Because if I look back on it, one day I was driving. My son was very young. He was in preschool. I get a call from my wife, and she says, "Hey, he's been hurt. There's an accident. Can you get over there?" I was flying. I was doing well over the speed limit. So nowadays, what I try to give people, I say, okay, somebody's got a family emergency, or maybe somebody's got to go to the bathroom, and that's why they're speeding so fast. I know that's probably not true. I know there are plenty of people out there who are speeding because they can and they want to, and that's just how they want to drive. But I don't get involved in the road rage anymore. It's not worth it.
Right, because now let's see what you did there. You had to tell yourself a story to
Yes.
redefine the meaning of getting cut off
Yes.
versus your natural gut trigger reaction.
Absolutely. And I think that translates a lot into the workplace. We tend to go right to that negative place. When someone does something, we tend to automatically assume, okay, they did that deliberately, they disrespected me, and we get all spun up. Whereas it could be they made a mistake, or maybe you misinterpreted what they were saying or doing. So I try to do my best never to ascribe negative intent to whatever anyone's doing, unless, of course, they do it over and over and over again.
And it's overt,
And
yeah.
if it's overt, or we bring it to their attention and they either shrug their shoulders and say, I don't care, which I have dealt with. I've dealt with leaders who are just like, I don't care. And you know what? They have revolving door staff.
Yeah. And this is kind of like, what they call microaggression.
That's right.
Where
That's
the
right.
person doing it, there's no evil intent, but the person receiving it has the knee-jerk reaction that you should have thought about how I would react to this.
Absolutely. Respect is really in the eye of the receiver, not in the eye of the giver. I'll give you an example. I work with a major government contracting firm where there are a lot of former military folks who have been very toughened and very hardened by their time as active duty military members. And then they translate that behavior, they engage in that behavior in a civilian environment with people who have never served. And they're like, what did I do? What's the problem? And the problem is that kind of leadership style works really well in the military. If we're in the middle of a firefight, we don't have time to stand around and say, well, Brian, what are your thoughts on this matter? How do you think we should deal with it?
Should we shoot back?
Yeah, exactly. We don't have time for that. Somebody has to take control, and that's how lives are saved. But in a civilian, in a corporate environment, that kind of command and control, that kind of brusque, do as I say kind of attitude, it doesn't fly. People want to be respected. People want to be asked their opinion. People want to be valued for what they bring to the table, and not just ordered around. You might as well get somebody who's just going to follow orders if that's what you want.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, we have to cut each other some slack. It's important that leaders understand that the respect they give is actually going to be reciprocated big time by the people they lead, and that there's a lot of benefit to being respectful.
And a lot of this kind of falls into what's been called like the outward mindset, the ability to think like somebody else, to have empathy for them, curiosity and interest in them, which is kind of like which is respect, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Emotional, it falls under the rubric of emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Empathy is very, very important as a leader, especially in really tough times. The COVID virus, and we've got the protests going on, and all of the political stuff that's happening, certainly in the U.S. and anywhere around the world. A leader right now needs a lot of empathy, and without it, people will ascribe negative intent.
Yeah.
And so it's absolutely imperative that we, as somebody who worked with cops, right,
because they trigger just like everyone else.
Yes, the pullover is the most dangerous situation for any street police officer, that is, or highway patrol, you name it. That is the most dangerous, likely to result in injury. So a police officer will walk into that situation on full alert for everything with a hair trigger. And so anything that happens, and then don't forget what's called unconscious bias. If you think the person you're pulling over is likely to be a criminal, and now we're going to get down into all sorts of racial conversations, then you're much more likely to engage in at least disrespectful or violent behavior towards that criminal. So it is such, being a cop is an incredibly hard job. It is not for me. It's not something I could ever do. But I will tell you that the police officers that I work with in the New York City Police Department were the ones who kept their cool, kept their calm. It was especially the old beat cops, the women and men who have been on the street for years and years and years, and they knew just how to say the right thing that would de-escalate a situation. They're too old to get involved in a fighting match with somebody twice their size, so they learned how to de-escalate. They learned how to use respect as a tool to keep people safe. Those are the cops I have enormous admiration for.
And I'm always surprised that you can get a driver's license without having a test about how do you behave when you get pulled over.
Yeah.
Do you argue?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Now, I know, and this is sad, this is unfortunately a very sad fact of our culture. There is an organization that specifically has a checklist for African-American males of what to do when pulled over by an officer of any race. Here's exactly what you do in order to keep yourself safe. And isn't that sad? Isn't that sad that this is where we've come to in our culture? But it is what it is. Our hope, my hope at the Center for Respectful Leadership is that we, as a society and as a culture, begin to realize how important respect is for everyone, not just for cops, but for everyone. And if we can elevate the conversation around respect in our businesses, in our sales organizations, boy, if you've worked in sales, you've probably seen some serious disrespect going on there too.
Yeah, I struggled with it early in my career because I was hyper-focused on closing deals.
Right.
And everybody within my company, right, I needed something, I expressed my need.
Yep.
And a lot of times I didn't do it well.
Well, fair enough. We live and we learn. I definitely, in my sales roles, I've definitely made some major mistakes. What I do when I work with sales folks is I don't give them a script. I know a lot of folks feel there's like this magic script you can follow. I'm all about intention. What's your intention? If you treat someone with respect and you don't get the sales script right, it's okay. But if you get the sales script exactly right, but your intention there's no level of respect for the customer inside of it, the customer has what I call a really good BS detector. Yeah. And they know that you're shining them on. Even though you're running the script exactly as it's supposed to go, they have this gut reaction, no, I don't feel right. And they're much less likely to close the deal with you. Even and reverses happen. Recently, my wife got a new car, and we sat down with the sales guy who'd been around and done it for years and years and years. He never ran a script with us ever. We talked about needs. We went back and forth. He developed a relationship with us, and it was so funny. Every time I would say to my wife, we'd step away, and I'd say, boy, he's doing such a good job developing a great relationship with us. Yeah. And at the end of the day, we got a deal that made us very happy. He made money off the deal. The GM of the dealership was very happy. Everybody was happy. And boy, I mean, when does that happen?
Well, I mean, certainly you learn that during your improv. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it, and a whole lot of other things.
Yeah.
Body language, smile, eye contact,
and it must come from it's got to come from a genuine place, a sincere place. And I've always told my clients when I'm in the middle of a pitch, I'm saying, let's talk about fit. Let's make sure that this is right for you. And that's what this sales guy at the dealership did. He says, let's make sure this car that you're interested in is the exact right car for you. So we went up through that a lot. And we had gone to other dealerships where they were really putting the pressure on us. And he didn't do that. And eventually we did come to an agreement of what was the exact right car, and we went ahead and bought it. So at the end of the day, if you're in sales and you're interested in your customers genuinely and you treat them with respect, it doesn't matter if you run the script right. It doesn't matter at all. You'll come to a good place. I am certain of that.
Because he was focused on the platinum rule.
Yeah.
That is how you wanted to be treated.
Yeah. And then we've told everybody we know about this guy, this rep at this dealership. We've told everybody about him. He's the nicest. Also, interestingly enough, he's from Iran. He's been lived here for years. He has a pretty strong accent, but he's the most gentle, a sincere and genuine person I think I've ever met in a car dealership.
Yeah.
And isn't that, and you know, from what I understand, he's their top seller year after year after year after year.
Yeah.
So not bad.
And are you finding that people are more disrespectful nowadays than they were earlier, or that we're not socialized to be respectful?
That's a great question, Brian. What our research is telling us, both anecdotal and looking back historically, is right now, at least in American society, we are experiencing what I call public disrespect, more public disrespect for each other, for institutions, for government, for private industry than we have since the height of the Vietnam War, the late 1960s. Yeah. So right now we're kind of in that space, and I'm not going to make any guesses of how old you are, but I was 8, 9 years old, 1968, 69. So I don't really remember it, but I certainly know that my parents did and lived through it. And the only difference now between the level of disrespect that occurred back then and now is that we now have these devices, which we use all the time to telegraph our disrespect through social media and TV and video and all that kind of stuff. We didn't have that back then.
And I think it's also that the consumer has become king, which means if the consumer complains, everybody must jump. So they think that can transfer to every other part of their life. Yeah.
I've forgotten who uses the term brand slaughter. Oh. And what that essentially means is that if you as a brand are perceived as uncaring or disrespectful towards your customers, that is going to go viral really, really fast. Oh. And you look at the brands who have come through difficult times. I'm going to point at Nike, for example. Now, Nike has consistently stood on the side of Black Lives Matter and on the side of progressive protest and so on, and align themselves with Colin Kaepernick. And guess what? Revenues are doing just fine for Nike, just fine, even though there's been a lot of upset around in various cultures and societies about Nike's stance on this and that. At the end of the day, Nike knows its customer and and puts out a very good product. And you know what? For all the people screaming and burning their Nike products on video, they're okay with that because from their point of view, they are taking care of their brand as best they can, and that's working for them.
Right, and their brand is rebels. It is exceptions.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it.
The underdog who becomes the champion.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Serena and
right? You can see this in tons of brands. What is, I believe, and this is me as a social scientist, I believe that coming out of COVID, the brands that are going to succeed are the ones that not only take care of their people, the people who work for them, but also look out to their customers, support their customers, and the greater culture and community at large. Yeah. I am convinced that we're no longer in a transactional economy. We are now in a much more robust and holistic economy. And if leaders don't understand that dynamic, they are going to go away fast. If you don't mind me bringing up WeWork, are you okay with that, Brian?
Yeah, sure, good.
Have they shot themselves in the foot over and over and over again. And their brand, talk about brand slaughter. They just, I have offices in WeWork, and I'm furious at them. I'm absolutely furious. There was no consideration for me. I couldn't go into WeWork, even though they kept saying we're open, we're open. No one went in there because we were concerned about catching the virus, and it's a very social place. So there was no offer of a reduction in rent. There was no kind of renegotiation. There was nothing coming from that company whatsoever. And so that was globally. So, and I think are they on the verge of bankruptcy? I'm not sure. But,
well, SoftBank reneged on their investment.
That's right.
And the former CEO and founder is suing them for his payment.
And he got bought out at hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, the whole thing, million. House of cards. And conceptually, it's co-working spaces is a great idea. It's their execution was just horrific.
It hit the perfect storm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And I blame their leadership from the get-go. They didn't care about their tenants. They didn't care about their community. It was all about just incredibly rapid growth and in my opinion, taking advantage of a trend. Yeah. And boy, did it backfire.
And how can people build a respect habit?
Oh, that's a great question. Thanks for asking that. I think one of the things that we have to acknowledge as leaders is that there are little things we can do, as long as they come from a sincere and genuine place, little things we can say, little things that we can do that let people know that we are making the attempt to be respectful, such as good morning and how are you, and really asking and really listening. Yeah. Asking people how they want to be addressed when you first meet them. Do you prefer your first name, your last name? Do you have are you a doctor of some kind? How do you want to be addressed? Also, calling out disrespect in a way that's respectful. For example, that I often use, if people interrupt each other in meetings and so on, I would say to the team, hey folks, let's let everybody have their say, and before we jump in with our say. And so I'll try to, I call it nipping disrespect in the bud, and nipping it in the bud early on and doing it in a way that is respectful, but it lets everybody know that you're trying to be respectful towards everyone. It's little things like that, like please and thank you, and doing these from a sincere place. They go so far, and they demonstrate that respect is taking action. You're taking some kind of action. It's not just a concept. It's not just an idea. You're actually doing things that people consider respectful. So it's not a big, I just want you to know, in answer to your question, it's not a big kind of process that you've got to go through and walk over coals and become this huge new human being. It's all about the little things. And you engage in the little things from a sincere point of view, a sincere place in your heart, you're going to be fine.
Cool. Hey, this has been a fun conversation.
Thank you.
Where can people go to connect with you and learn more about your work?
Please visit my organization. We're called the Center for Respectful Leadership, and you'll find us on the web as respectfulleadership.org. Again, that's respectfulleadership.org, O-R-G. And there's all sorts of free resources there. Sign up to become a member. And I may even be happy to give you a complimentary coaching call if you've got an issue coming up. I'm happy to help you. And I just want to help the world become a better place and more respectful for all.